Dr. Alex Watson is a principal lecturer in academic studies at Performers College BIMM University, formerly the IC Theatre Brighton. He is published in Theatre Notebook, JCDE, Contemporary Theatre Review, and his monograph, Staging Systemic Violence, British Theatre 2010 to 2019, is published in the Methuen Engage series, the same as Tom. He is currently working on two projects, the first being the next volume of Methewen's Modern British Playwriting series, focusing on the 2010s, and the second exploring contemporary Anglophone one-person performance, which is the subject of this paper. Take it away, Alex.
So one-person plays, or monodrama, as I'm going to call it here, have exponentially increased in popularity as a theatrical form over the last decade and a half, thereabouts. It's now so popular, in fact, that current commentary on the form regards it almost farcically or contemptuously. Sorry, people online. There we go. Yep, cool. Hear me now. What you've just missed is me saying that one-person plays of monodrama are absolutely everywhere now, and that current writing on it is pretty contemptuous of it. So the specific subgenre of monodrama, titled by the Stage's Fergus Morgan as solo shows about awful experiences, which I'm going to more concisely call confessional autofiction here, has become one of the most distinct types of or 2020s new writing. That initially said post-pandemic new writing, but I don't want to anger Ben. So as Morgan bemoans of the 2024 Edinburgh Fringe, I am bored and tired of seeing solo shows that basically boil down to someone going on and on about something terrible that has happened to them. Anyone go to the Fringe this year? Would they agree with that statement? Ish. Okay. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, I mean, he does acknowledge the obvious reasons for this influx. The affordability of solo plays obviously is a big one, particularly if the writer, director and performer are all the same person. There's the ability for serious or sensitive subjects to open up funding opportunities. There's the global omni or perma crisis that's variously driving these awful experiences that he bashes. And there is obviously a commendable bravery and honesty in putting something personal and painful on stage, but his distaste for them is in the cumulative effect they have on theatre culture. And I think such plays are indicative of what can be cheekily referred to as the Fleabagification of contemporary theatre. This kind of perceived pathway for creatives that begins with a confessional, autofictional solo fringe show and then leads to a Netflix deal, which is actually satirised in Liz Kingsman's one-woman show, and is obviously recently controversially seen in Richard Gadd's Baby Reindeer. But they're more generally indicative, I would say, of a shift across all contemporary media, which is identified by the cultural theorist Anna Kornbluh as immediacy style, examples of which tend to depict social issues, but due to their absorbing individualistic-oriented forms, are often atrophied in their ability to foster political affect. So this paper represents a developing part of my research project into post-2009 Anglophone monodrama and connected dramaturgical forms, currently entitled First-Person Theatre, which I think is a really good name, actually. Just saying. So since the Great Recession, media styles and strategies have become increasingly solipsistic, and this has arguably emerged in theatre most distinctly through monodrama, and particularly with confessional autofictional work. By the way, if anyone is interested in autofictional theatre, Leanna Mark's bringing a book about it out in December. So yeah, look out for that. So while my research is still underway, my current main contention is that those examples of first-person theatre that forgo the ostensible individualism of their form to engage in genuine collaboration with disparate groups, creatives, or projects offer the most political charge and often the most innovation and captivation. Or, as Lynn Gardner puts it, the one-person show is at its most interesting when it looks outwards rather than in, and playing on the relationship between performer and audience wants to be a conversation rather than a monologue. See, for example, Travis Alabanza's Burgers, or Arinze Kenny's Misty, which we already talked about, or even the work of Tim Crouch. However, it was not actually until I encountered Tom's work back in August that I actually considered post-2009 monodrama within the context of metamodernism. So contemporary monodrama can certainly fall under his identification of much recent British theatre being something of a return to storytelling, affect, engagement, connection and authenticity, whilst continuing to paradoxically be disaffected, disengaged, disconnected, critical of meta-narratives and overtly aware of theatre's inherent inauthenticity. I pose here then whether recent solo theatre that falls under this definition of metamodernism can be figured along a kind of sliding scale of immediacy, with those productions that more blatantly demonstrate immediacy style being more self-absorbed and almost apolitical. So if metamodernism is a description of a cultural movement and art that is at once inauthentic, ironic, honest, and hopeless, immediacy identifies how such art, when geared towards individualism, is politically blinkering for its audiences. So Kornbluh in this book defines immediacy as having an emphasis on directness and literalism. It is what it is. Self-identity without representation, #no filter, as well as a prepositionality, the inness or onness of immersion, intensity and identity. So the terminology of social media and the digital are key in Kornbluh's analysis, which I think are inherent reasons for the emergence of this style, the primary tools of which are personal individual feelings. As she continues, affirmations orient everything from the accumulation of social media likes to university composition pedagogy, from I feel seen mantras to industrial scale self-help, being what the political theorist Nancy Fraser has long described as the vector of liberalism that deflects struggles over power and resources into struggles over respect and identity. It forgoes the postmodern performance of anti-capitalism decried by Mark Fisher. Instead of detachment, skepticism, and irony, immediacy's authentications and engrossments now plat realness. See, for example, the lyrical styles of Taylor Swift or Charlie XCX. In addition to globalization and communication advancements, it also has a response to permacrisis. Amid crisis, alienation, and stratification, immediacy feels right, urgent, engaging, homogenizing. But this is pharmacon, remedy and poison in one. Working through rather than working out would involve cognizing that it doesn't have to be this way. It is too late at the same time as it is not too late. Immediacy is then unable to remedy the issues that engender creators and consumers towards it. Chic, real without depth, and politically shallow, immediacy is so brat. I love that album, by the way, so, you know, #no shade. So first-person narratives, particularly those that use autofiction or direct address, are singled out by Kornbluh as being especially guilty of this style, with their filtering of social and historical dynamics through subjective lenses, the promotion of phenomenology as a limit horizon for knowledge, and the enterprise of confessionalism, among other criticisms. So it may come as no surprise then that she zeroes in specifically on Fleabag as being exemplary of immediacy. The streaming form of hyper-scrutinous closeness takes the camera as a prosthesis of intimacy that finally reifies banal social isolation. Why make the effort to relate to the real other beside you when you can so seamlessly relate to the imaginary other in the screen? Hello, online viewers. So unlike the Brechtian Bertram Dunks effect, Fleabag's own direct address has this continuous flow, producing an identity or indistinction between speaker and viewer and closing the critical gap along with its political potential. Could we maybe call this the Fleabag dunks effect? I don't know. Sorry. As immediacy looks to dissolve mediation, there could be some arguments that actor-audience relations in monodrama result in a natural adoption of this style. So, stream of consciousness, sharing of personal experiences, the focus on an individual, confessionalism, proximity, and an emphasis on being real and the realness of theatre relative to screen media. These techniques and more could be considered to various extents tools of immediacy. Now, for the eagle-eyed among you, the description of this style no doubt demonstrates crossover with some definitions of metamodernism. I should actually note that Kornbluh herself does not draw any similarities between metamodernism and immediacy in her study, only getting as close as to reference Lee Constantinu's chapter in a 2017 edited collection on metamodernism for the purposes of maintaining that postmodernism no longer furnishes the logic of the contemporary, which is obviously a central claim of both metamodernism and immediacy. So with these connections in mind, I would tentatively contend here that immediacy might itself be a sort of style of metamodernism, a version that retains the aesthetics of its oscillatory ironicity, but disavows political aspirations in favour of immersive identification and surface-level affect. Indeed, it may well be the ways in which emotions, feelings, and affect are engaged with or represented that necessitates whether metamodern solo theatre can engender political action in its audience, or at least ask them to reconsider political, cultural, or ideological concerns in a renewed or alternate manner. So to illustrate this, I will briefly touch on two recent examples of metamodern monodrama that display symptoms of immediacy style. The first of these is Katie Mitchell's production of the Baltimore eco-feminist playwright Miranda Rose Hall's A Play for the Living in a Time of Extinction, which played at the Barbican in April 2023. There's loads I can discuss of this production. For example, its use of energy-generating static bicycles, the fact it toured nationally and internationally, but to reduce carbon costs, the creatives and performers would often be sourced from each city or town it toured to. But of most relevance here is the play's form, being a meta-theatrical monologue by a dramaturg called Naomi, who's played in the Barbican run by Lydia West, under the pretext that her theatre company's in-your-face spectacular meditation on the catastrophe of climate change, which would culminate in an unscientific apocalyptic bacchanal, has had to be reformulated because one of the company members' mothers is dying, and this mother who's dying becomes like a kind of relational symbol of the sixth mass extinction, with the species of which kind of like being related in a familial way to humankind. So instead, Naomi, who's just over there, offers her agonized responses to mass extinction and climate crisis in a lecture-like manner, featuring some light audience participation and generalized appeals to action after broadly identifying many of the interconnected structural issues informing ecosystem collapse. So Play for the Living possesses some metamodern hallmarks in its back and forth between meta-theatricality and urgent appeal, facts and feelings, and the artifice of theatre alongside the reality of species extinction. However, and as I've more thoroughly critiqued in an upcoming article of JCDE, Play for the Living fails to live up to its lofty political aspirations because of its immediacy. Naomi continually slides into confessions of personalized emotions with salient facts repeatedly related back to her feelings. For example, she deplores that I think we haven't actually contended in an honest way with climate crisis that can adequately respond to the way I feel. So while the fluctuation between irony and sincerity in metamodernism highlights the audience's felt experience in their viewing of the piece, Play for the Living mistakenly represents Naomi's ecological anguish, no doubt a stand-in for the writers, as if the audience will mimetically feel the same. As Helen Hawkins reviews, perhaps the play is deliberately over-emotive, but nevertheless found it went over the top into unbridled slush. Ouch. So the primacy of Naomi's viewpoint in the play and mitigated little, I think, in Mitchell's staging, with a BSL interpreter and stationary cyclists sort of framing her centre-stagedness, ineffectually reduces and personalizes the massive hyper-object of climate crisis, which is particularly egregious, I think, in a play that tries to ostensibly champion the importance of non-individual, non-human life. So while voicing one's personal experience in response to global and systemic issues might feel like drawing attention to them, when presented as a cathartic demonstration of one's inner truth rather than a tool through which to harness interdependent collective action, it becomes closer to a narcissistic blanket of self-affirmation. To restate Kornbluh, it is pharmacon, remedy and poison in one. So Play for the Living, I think, is exemplary of meta-modern monodrama that exists relatively far down the scale of immediacy. It fails to engender real political affect in its audience, evidenced in its many unflattering reviews. But I would not certainly call it completely apolitical. Indeed, I would deviate from Kornbluh's conclusion that the techniques of immediacy blinker collective political realities completely. While it has arisen from precarity and individualism, and in many cases authorizes them unconsciously or otherwise, immediacy's techniques of directness and dissolution of mediation can be used for productive means in certain measures, disavowing the self to link personal experiences to wider systemic issues. A recent example of this is Omar Illyrian's production of Nowhere, written and performed by Khalid Abdallah, which played at the Battersea Arts Centre and then Home Manchester in October. So Abdallah narrates his what he calls his anti-biography, telling the story of his life disrupted by, subsumed into, and shaped by geopolitical events and structural violence. Personal relationships are discussed, which, while sometimes threatening self-absorption, are continually placed in wider contexts that demonstrate the individual as contingent and circumstantial. In moments of ephemeral community construction and literal self-reflection, the audience are asked to answer questions about their background by affirmatively stamping their feet, as well as drawing a blind self-portrait. That's an example of one there. For those who are interested, here's my blind self-portrait, which I don't know what that tells you about my inner state, but never mind. So in the performance, Abdallah frequently refers to the plight of the Palestinian people. For much of the production, in this almost kind of like hushed, ironically self-censoring manner, he mutters, "Mustn't talk about that," a few times. But towards the conclusion, he drops this facade to really urgently and passionately appeal for them. So Nowhere is another example, I think, of metamodern monodrama that possesses characteristics of immediacy, such as its filtering of social and historical dynamics through subjective lenses, but obviously it's far from apolitical. Abdallah even, towards the play's conclusion, offers a metamodern working through of his understanding of peace, confessing that he once connoted it to a bourgeois desire to halt subjective violence without tackling systemic issues. He holds this cynical but realistic understanding even as he constructs an origami dove in a sincere symbol of hope, on which a spotlight lingers as the show ends. James Robertson's review states, "The play's power is in its immediacy. How we can make sense of the present by investigating the past is at the heart of it." So he refers here to both Abdallah's charismatic rapport with the audience as well as the timeliness of the show's concerns, rather than Kornbluh in his use of immediacy here. Yet immediacy techniques do indeed bring political power to the performance. While Abdallah's feelings are certainly performed for the audience, we are not brought into the the Fleabag dunks effect, hyper-scrutinous closeness with them, due to the difference established between the various identities gathered together in the room as an audience. A critical gap, rather than an identification, is opened through the metamodern technique of being cognizant of theatre's artificiality and the reality of the gathered assemblage, while using that knowledge to sincerely promote an urgent political message. Nowhere's power is indeed in its immediacy, but it is metamodern enough to retain a powerful political message of hope. So, to briefly summarize then, if metamodernism is indeed the defining cultural form of our time, then an understanding of immediacy might serve as a warning for this form to ensure that techniques like the distillation of mediation and focus on individual experience do not place a kind of formal muzzle on its attempts to engender political affect. In other words, the Brechtian connotations attendant on the prefix meta in a theatrical context should remain, rather than the Fleabag dunks effect. Sorry, I'll not say that anymore. Closing of the critical gap. So while immediacy techniques, I believe, are not inherently politically blinkering, the recourse to flat identification of characters' feelings as being inseparable from the audience's own, rather than pivoting the production on the fostering of the audience's feelings, can lead to theatre that is political in theory, but flat in practice. And while feelings are obviously, after Sara Ahmed, necessary for political activism, the employment of feelings as an end in themselves demonstrates Slavoj Žižek's contention that when you look deep enough inside yourself for the truth, all you'll find is shit. So, in other words, in order for monodrama to succeed as a form, it needs to be about much, much more than just the experiences of the one person on stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Amazing. Any questions for Alex? Oh, anything online? Go for it, Tom.
So Andrew Corser is asking online, did you intend to imply that autofictions will tend to be apolitical or to muzzle political affect? If so, I'd like to push back on this a bit. Autofiction can draw attention to our ability to create new narratives for ourselves and to recreate ourselves. Might they then help us to rethink how we relate to the problems and political issues that our societies face? Or would you say that only metamodern autofictions could do this?
Sorry, am I illegible? Yeah, good. No, I wouldn't say that all kind of like confessional autofiction, even those that use immediacy kind of like techniques, are politically muzzled. So those examples I gave at the start, like Travis Alabanza's Burgers, Arinze Kene's Misty, I think use some techniques of immediacy, but like, yeah, obviously are not politically muzzled. Even I think is it Deborah Stevenson's Poet in the Corner as well? I think that uses a lot of autofictional techniques in a very politically active way. So no, I agree with you. I don't think autofictional is an inherently politically muzzled form. I just think that when you kind of like highlight individual experience and as an end in itself that's you can relate to as an audience member, then that's when the issues start in terms of like engendering political effect. When you kind of like continually link individual experience to systemic issues like something like Misty or Burgers does, it kind of like, yeah, it invites that political activism into it. And I think it is more it's more metamodern, isn't it, when you like consistently relate like your phenomenological experience back to wider systemic issues, and you have that oscillation between those things. Yeah, so I'd just say it's that theatre that doesn't really look outwards, that just stays fixated on the individual and the truth of their personal experiences on stage, as divorced from any wider systemic issues, which I think in some ways Fleabag is guilty of. We can argue that, that's fine. But yeah, so I wouldn't say as a form autofictional is politically stunted, not at all. No. Leanna Mark is writing the book on autofiction, is a good friend of mine. So if I did contend that, I'd probably get into trouble with her.
Interesting. I think it links back to that idea of like that together apartness idea, because as I was listening to that, and I've heard a lot of that before at TAPRA this year, that sense of the self-flagellation of autofiction and who's actually getting any hope from that afterwards, I suppose.
Thanks so much, Alex, for these. Nasli in the chat has said, thank you so much, excellent. What about the paradox of hidden histories versus known main narratives? Is there an asterisk here on the need of the solo voice that surfaces or unearths or decenters?
Yeah, fair enough. And there's obviously, you know, a lot to be said about having a central individual experience on stage when that central individual experience is from a group or identity or a marginalized identity that you don't really see on stage all that much. So yeah, I am aware of that as well. But in terms of like hidden histories, I think that kind of like inherently kind of like has that nice oscillation between individualism and then wider things going on. But yeah, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
yeah, okay, so thank you, Alex, for that. Another round of applause. Oh, I'm sorry, we've got time. I know. Chat to Alex, he's great, isn't it? Yeah.
I won't bite.
Cool. So next, shall I introduce them, Tom?
Yes. Caridad and Dermot, do you, after James has introduced you both, do you want to do an introduction or do you want the students to give it a go?
How do you want to proceed, Dermot? Do you want to have the students go first?
Let's go. Let's do students first. They are more important.
Cool.
There you are.
I'll introduce you. I'll introduce you guys, and then I'll let them take it away.
Brilliant.
So, we've now got the next 100 years as meta-modern intimate theatrical epic from Caridad Svich and Dermot Daly. So Caridad is a text builder, playwright, screenwriter, translator, lyricist, and editor, and the 24 Guggenheim Foundation Fellow in Drama. She's received many honours, including an Obie for Lifetime Achievement and the Ellen Stewart Award for Career Achievement from ATHE, a Harvard/Radcliffe Institute Fellowship, and she's been a visiting fellow at the Royal Central School of Speech and Drama. Plays include 12 Ophelias, that's the word, Iphigenia, Crashland Falls, Red Bike, and The House of Spirits, based on Isabel Allen's novel. Recent books include Towards a Future Theatre, Audience Revolution, Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and The Hour of All Things and Other Plays. As screenwriter, the feature film Fugitive Dreams, based on a play, is on Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and more. Forthcoming book from Methuen in 2025 is Transmedia Theatre Plays. They're also an editor at the Contemporary Theatre Review and drama editor at another fun word, a Symptot literary journal, and on the advisory board of the Global Performance Studies Journal. She is also artistic director of new play development and at the Lucille Lortel Theatre in New York City. Oh, wow, that was a lot. Wow, that's amazing. And then Dermot Daly is a performance facilitator, a director, dramaturg, actor, researcher, writer, and lecturer. His work spans many areas of live and recorded performance and does so in many roles. Directing work includes boring techno makeout jams. I want to watch that. Best director, which was a best gave him the Best Director nomination for the Black British Theatre Awards. Luna Love's Library Day, the musical, The Impossible Family Reunion, an RPG space chap. Looking back to look forward to look back again. Rise. And his academic work includes publications in theatre, dance and performance training, arts praxis scene, Journal of the Arts and the Communities, and he sits on the editorial board of the Journal of Class and Culture. Another amazing resume. I will now pass over to our students.
In the next 100 years, I will walk into a meeting and pretend that I know all the answers. And when people ask me why, I will tell them that it's because I have read all the books. I will seem smart, even though I've just been waiting for the future to begin.
In the next 100 years, I will read a book and forget where I am. Because the book will have taken over its own life, I'll feel as if I am living inside a book, even though people say that real life is cinema, and cinema is real life.
In the next 100 years, I will stop reading because my eyes will be tired. They will not know what is page 10 or even page 5. All the stories will be in my ears and I will welcome them. And if they were gifts from the heavens, even though the stories are just from people.
When my ears stop hearing, I will ask people to tell their stories with their hands, fingers in my palms, tapping out the bits. I will imagine characters and situations. I wonder why so much writing was devoted once to situations that people thought were dramatic, when life is random and dramatic things are usually blockbusters that have nothing to do with life.
I don't know how many times I have said these things.
I don't know if this is appropriate. I have never seen the world be like this, because I have never lived in the future.
I am not convinced that I am here.
Maybe this is a dream.
Maybe we are all dreaming this moment right now, as we sift through the evidence of our lives and imagine the future traces that we will leave behind.
After all, it is said that the animals have often wondered why people behave in the way that they do.
There's never a good reason to kill anyone, but some people will justify it. This is what someone said once.
Everything we'll say from this moment forward will be history.
There's never a good reason to kill anyone, but some people will justify it.
When I go to the office to do the office things, people justify all sorts of behavior. I look at them as if they are in the past and have forgotten that this is a new life.
I can't breathe. Most people can't these days. We walk around with breathing apparatus and hope to be fine.
The word hope does a lot of heavy lifting.
This was because of the absent leaders that governed once and hollow gestures in prior times. These leaders either barely said anything to the people or repeated words from blockbuster movies to sell their lies.
The hollow people governed the world. Many people said that these people were good people and that those were the good times, even though those times were sad.
The hollow leaders couldn't bear to look at sadness. Their idea of reality was like a cartoon movie filled with gangsters.
This was because of the oligarchs.
This was because the orcas didn't get to everyone in time.
We miss the orcas. We miss the sea lions. We love the sea even though it's turned green.
We were once part of the orca revolution.
In the green, someone says, we will rise. And when they say this, people are surprised, because usually they expect us to say something about patriarchy.
I don't own any antiques. I will never be on any TV show. I am ordinary.
I don't think I can chalk it up to losing eyesight or other facilities. Things happen because they happen. What I cling to are stories told by parents, long rides in buses and cars, mysterious games of hide and seek. All those things are ghosts now, traces of themselves. They slip through the everyday and live underneath my eyelids. The iris of a non-camera stares back at me and wonders why.
In the movies, people say things. I don't understand them. The words are not on the screen because some people say that words distract them. But I literally cannot understand what anyone is saying. So I make up the script. I make up the dialogue. I look at the images and create my own narrative. The screen doesn't mind. The screen doesn't see me. Movies go on even when no one is watching.
That was ace. That was really good.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I start in a really weird way? And I can see the students have all left, so someone will need to relay this. This was terrible timing on my part. Can I ask, this is with my director's head on, how did that feel?
Does anyone want to respond? As the performers or an audience?
Let's go with performers.
I think it was a bit nerve-wracking to not know what you're saying or like to really know what it is, but it was kind of fun to go on the journey to discover what it was about. And as people were reading more, you kind of connected the dots, and by the end of it I felt like very in tune with what it was saying. Well, I think I did anyway. Tune with kind of like what was going on and stuff, but it was a bit nerving, I'll be honest.
I can't see you, so I can't see you. So what's your name?
Sophia.
Sophia. Hello, Sophia.
Hey.
I can't see you. Where are you? There you are. Hello. Yeah. You started off, interestingly, for me, you started off there with your answer by saying that you didn't know what you were going to say in terms of the performance.
Yes.
And we're having a conversation now. You don't know what you're going to say.
Yes.
So how are you navigating this? How are you joining the dots?
Through confidence and guessing, I feel, to kind of see the information and just connect the dots myself. I have a brain. As much as it might not be the dots that the author connected, I'm still going to connect them. And I think that's where it comes from, maybe. I don't know if that was right.
I think that was spot on. And I also think what you've done, Sophia, thank you. You've kind of, in a way, encapsulated what this play is about. It's about you connecting the dots. It's about you making sense of it. It's about you making it up as you go along. It's about you finding the solutions in the moment. It's about you realizing what is right for you is right. I'm going to say this, and I know Carrie's here, but it almost, as a director, it almost doesn't matter what the writer intended. As a director, what I care about is what the performer feels. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Cool. Right, I've hijacked
Yes, it
that.
does. Thank you.
That's all right. I hijacked that. What did we do? Anybody else in terms of performers? How did you feel? I'm really interested in feel and effect. And I felt that last conversation about effect in audience and all that sort of stuff kind of got the grey matter whirring.
It felt fine. It was, again, yeah, also, you know, going into it and not necessarily knowing where it would take us was exciting. I think we've been talking about a lot of like intermedial and different platforms of which we, you know, express, and metamodernism is expressed. So it's always intriguing to, you know, dive into something that you don't necessarily know where it's going to take you, and the references to things like life being cinema and, you know, the ever performance of life was exciting.
This is great. Can I hear from somebody who was an audience member? And I'm saying that because I think we're all audience and we're all performers in this space. But somebody who wasn't stood, who was sat watching, how did that make you feel? What did you get out of it? Did it make any sense?
Hi, my name is Mika, and I was I was trying to join in the dots myself as I was watching it, and I guess I had like different connotations from, I don't know why Beckett, not I, kind of jumped into my head. Or because I was trying to remember also the play that we're doing, the three heads, and yeah, so I was watching it and I was kind of watching something else in my head whilst I was watching it, if that makes any sense.
That makes a huge amount of sense. I'm going to stop talking for a sec. Carrie.
Yes. Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks to Tom and everyone for organizing this event and inviting us. You know, I wanted to say a little bit about the next 100 years, and you know, when I was chatting with Tom initially, I said, you know, I have this piece that I think of as kind of like, I'm interested in the idea of intimacy and epic combined. So things that are intimate epic. Sometimes when people think about epic theatrically, they think, I don't know, distant or dispassionate or non-intimate. And so I'm interested in combining those things, which have to do, of course, with proximity and distance. And it's also wanting to make something that's choral and multivocal, or rather than individual. And that this has a lot to do with the political aspect of the piece, being that it's meant to be a collective body speaking rather than, the solo journey. It's sort of interesting looking at Alex Watts's presentation on monodrama, right? Because the idea of like the solo voice kind of, it's my story or the story that's being presented, whether it be the performer's story or not. But it kind of reinforces a hyper-individualism that's existent in neoliberal society. So my interest with this piece and other pieces of mine that follow this kind of choral motif have to do with kind of breaking that apart, right? So it's not about hyper-individualism. It's about how do you become part of a collective body when the world is atomized, and the negotiation between immediacy and the Kornbluh sense. I'm so glad that the Kornbluh came up, yay! But also looking back, it's interesting what Tom said earlier at the beginning of the day, which feels like 1,000 hours ago. Temporality is interesting. So around the 2010s, et cetera, this feeling that something was shifting theater, and like, what was it? And it wasn't postmodernism, what is it? And I always think about it around, this is one signifier of this, but of Lauren Berlant's Cruel Optimism. So I think when Cruel Optimism launches in 2011, I think Berlant's kind of articulation of affect theory, right? So we've talked a lot about the structure of feeling today. I think sends us into this direction, actually. And I think that whether people were reading Berlant or not in theater at the time, I think that if there is this shift in how we start thinking about what is the next path after postmodernism, right? Because they feel that itch, you feel that anxiety. And I think this is also related to lost futures, again, Fisher, Derrida, et cetera, and not only facing, but being in climate catastrophe and ecological breakdown. And so that the idea of the future, which next 100 years is sort of about, right? How do we think about the next 100 years from the now, given when will there be a next 100 years, question mark? So those are some thoughts that are wrapping around my brain, but I want to pass it, I want to hog the conversation and pass it on to Dermot.
I just interestingly hearing this version through a load of things in my head. When I first encountered this play, this piece, this work, I'm gonna say play, I'm not gonna say work. I should reiterate. I should explain what I mean by that. We talk about plays, and the reason why I love using the word play, because it reminds me that that's what we're doing. Work is finite, play is almost endless. So I'm culturing a preference to talk about plays, even though in certain circles that makes it sound like I'm a 13-year-old. But I tell stories for a living, so maybe I am. But when I first encountered this play, the world was a very different place to the world that it is now. I'm going to try and not be overtly political, but we were all on Twitter when this first happened. I think we had a different government when this happened on both sides of the pond. It wasn't snowing as it has been today. Like, the world is different, and we'll look at this play again tomorrow and the day after and next year and the year after that, and we'll feel different things. We're all older, we've all experienced different things. So just watching that, and we're going to look at a video version of this that we did. Was it last year?
I think it was this year.
Oh God, there you go. Timey-wimey. But that version was very different. So that's one thing in terms of time and the way that time impacts on the way that we understand the world and the way that the world understands us. The second thing that I was really taken by is you guys are all down in London. I'm up in Yorkshire, Carrie's over in the States, but we're all in the same place. And pre-COVID, this sort of thing would not have been common. The world has changed in the last 4 years. And it's changed in a myriad of ways. Like a lot of our conversations were digital, a lot of them were remote. And now, personally, if I can be in the same room as people, I will. But it's, and I say that being on the same landmass as you all down there in London, and I'm not gutted, sorry. But I like the fact that it allows us to play. It gives the tools to different people. It allows us to do things that we couldn't have done before. The questions I asked you after, how do you feel, is quite literally the same question that I ask after every rehearsal that I've ever done. Because I'm interested in what the feeling was. But I've been able to do that across a landmass. That, I think, is a massive opportunity. It's a massive boon, I think, of the world that we're in. But also, if we're making work and we're not talking about the world in which we're in, why are we making work? And there is a challenge. And I don't mean that in the sense of you can make a screwball comedy about a car blowing up. Great. But what am I going to take from that? How am I going to join those dots? Maybe that car represents my brain at the minute. Maybe that car represents the stack of books in my office that need to be put away. I'm connecting those dots. And I think that's really fun and exciting. I think thinking about possibilities, thinking about kind of, because we've spoken quite a bit, Carrie, about how this piece might find its way into the world.
Yeah.
It might further find its way into the world because it already is. It could be a filmed piece, it could be a radio piece, it could be an audio piece. Radio and audio, I would say, are very different, or could be very different. It could be an installation, it could be a dance piece, it could be a music piece. It could really lean into the choralization of voices. It could be stripped away. Like this piece is written for, is it 120 something potentially?
Potentially, if it's just one single one, 779.
There you go.
Voices, yeah.
So we could have like the entirety of Highbury, not Highbury, that's how bloody old I am. We could have the entirety of, half of the stand at the Emirates kind of doing this and just passing it along. We could do it at the National and have everybody in every seat saying something. Or it could be one person. Mm-hmm. And just in doing that, we change the mode of transmission, we change the mode of understanding. And in terms of performing it, it changes you. Yeah, those are my thoughts. A jumble sale of them, you might say. I found that incredibly emotional, weirdly. Just for context, a lot of those actors are at Leeds Conservatoire, which is one of the places that I lecture at. Some of whom have graduated, some of whom are in their graduating year, some of whom I saw yesterday. But seeing them now and seeing them there that's really weird. That idea of time slippage, that's quite beautiful, actually.
Yeah, it's very emotional for me too. Also in the context of today's live reading as well, juxtaposed to this. And there's also something about, this is something that Benjamin brought up in their talk about one of the things that digital theater that is over, what people call these days common platforms like Zoom, etc., Teams, and so forth, is that often people are shooting stuff in their own home or in their own spaces. And so there's something about, again, that sense of intimacy, like, oh, they're there in their place and they're beaming into me and they're speaking to me and you're speaking to, and also the juxtaposition, the architectural spatial, sort of what I call accidental spatial choreography, because this was an unrehearsed reading, right? So we weren't like, stand in that corner when you say that line, you know, it was more like wherever you happen to be, right? So that sort of accidental choreography of everybody's individual spaces, framing them, how they're also positioning themselves towards the webcam. There's something sort of beautiful and vulnerable about that, which I really respond to as a viewer, and even just, you know, and it's weird because I think the text for me, it's so interesting. What was that first thing, how you feel? And I was like, I didn't know what I was going to say. And I was like, that's how I feel when I write. What's going to happen? I don't know. Something will happen maybe. So yeah, so it has that's feeling, yeah.
Amazing. I will maybe just ask if there's like anyone's got one question only.
Hi.
Perfect, go ahead.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everybody. I just wanted to start by a shout out to the readers in both spaces. Thank you so much. I had two thoughts. Are cold read plays by nature metamodern? So I'm thinking about Nassim Soleimanpour's White Rabbit, Red Rabbit. And the other thought was, in the choral writing, as it was just being articulated as a crucible of experimentation, expression of hope, faith, new mass multiple ideas of being, it got me thinking about contemporary opera going beyond the idea of thinking Greek. So choral construction going beyond a palimpsest, a repeat, repeat, repeat. What happens when we decenter that?
Shall we flip a coin, Dermot? Do you want to take half of it and I'll take the other half?
You go first and I'll piggyback off that. Nazli,
right.
That was a brilliant question, which my brain's just gone,
Yeah, super cool. I mean, I think one of the things you mentioned, Nassim's work, absolutely inspirational, in the sense that one of the offers that I make with this script is that it could actually be performed unrehearsed by whoever shows up. So there's a version of this which could be the audience plays it. And there's some moments, we didn't get to them here today, but there's some moments that are like, there's a song and there's a dance sequence, and you should have choose them in advance. There's like a poll, like I do this thing at the back of the text where I go, you fill out like your top 5, and you might be asked to do one of these things. So kind of like a game. There's another version of this, which is it's rehearsed actors with some audience players. I have this, I keep saying this to Dermot, and I to everyone who I talk to about this play, which is I have this obsession with having it be rehearsed performers who then give the play over to the audience, that in a sense they cede the text to the audience and give it away. And I'm just kind of like I'm continually obsessed with that idea. Also in the nature of decentering the relationship between audience and performer, right? Because the performer is like literally on the stage, even if it's not a non-stage, you know what I mean? They're kind of elevated somehow. They know things, they've come in, they might have rehearsed, etc. And the audience is kind of subservient to that, right? In a sense. And so I'm also interested in kind of breaking that hierarchy and going, no, what happens if we're all in the same playing field and we all show up together at the same time and we all have this text to ourselves, and then see what happens. So that's something I'm interested in. In terms of the operatic sort of notion, in other texts of mine, I've played with like unison, like everybody's in unison, like the whole thing. And then with this one, there are sections that I think are in unison, but I was interested in more like a sort of minimalist choral, minimalist choral, right? Where it's like instrument, 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 group moment, instrument, instrument, group moment. So so we're kind of again an orchestra together, but we all have our individual instruments that we're playing. That is ourselves, right? And our specific voices. So I'll pass it over to Dermot.
I'm going to be really pithy because that's made things concrete in my head. Brilliant director Rod Dixon used to run Red Ladder Theatre Company, who is just ace. Said to me once that theatre is the nearest we'll get to telling stories around the campfire. And I feel that that's what this does. Our campfire is the story, and we sit around it. It would almost be, and one of the earliest ideas we had was potentially doing this in the round, but the space in the middle was empty.
Yeah.
And the players were all in the audience. And the middle is the hearth. It's where the heat goes to, but we all flow into that. And I would argue that theatre, by its very nature, is the nearest we can ever get to sitting around a fire with marshmallows or the vegan equivalent, and just telling stories.
Amazing. I think we'll leave it there. And one thing I like to do around the campfire is drink some wine, segue to a 10-minute comfort break. Thank you to those speakers on that panel.
Thanks so much, Caridad.
Thank you. Yeah.